Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's debate. My name is Kerry Hodgkinson, I'm the chairman, and Hannah Wheatcroft is the timekeeper. The adjudicator is Mrs. Lowen. The topic of this debate is that foreign investment and ownership are detrimental to Australia. The affirmative team seated to my right is Rostrevor College. The negative team seated to my left is Portside Christian College. The speaking time for this debate is 6 minutes. A single warning bell will sound 1 minute before the speaking time, and a double bell will sound at the speaking time. A continuous bell may be rung 30 seconds after the speaking time, in which case the speaker must sit down immediately. Please ensure that your mobile phones and other electronic devices are switched off. I declare this debate open and call upon the first affirmative speaker, Tom Basso.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that foreign investment and ownership are detrimental to Australia. As the affirmative team, we strongly agree with this notion. We, the affirmative team, define foreign as defined in the Oxford Dictionary of, from, in, or a characteristic of a country other than one's own. Investment, in accordance with the Free Dictionary, as property or another possession acquired for future financial return. Ownership we define as the Business Dictionary definition of the ultimate and exclusive rights conferred by a lawful claim or title and subject to certain restrictions to enjoy, occupy, possess, rent, sell, use, give way, or even destroy an owned property. Detrimental we have defined as stated in the Cambridge Dictionary as causing harm or damage. Finally, Australia, according to the Oxford Dictionary, as an island, country and continent of the Southern Hemisphere. I will now introduce our team's case. Tonight, I will discuss how the profit of foreign investment goes overseas, the idea of national sovereignty, and how there are very few iconic Australian brands that remain, the increased risk of national security and Australia being susceptible to an overseas crisis. Patrick, our second speaker, will discuss how foreign investment drives up property prices for Australians, the detriments of previous foreign investments, and the negative impact of foreign investors owning our national resources. Luke, our third speaker, will summarise our team's case and rebut. Now onto my own points. Firstly, each year, foreign-owned companies operating in Australia transfer hundreds of millions of dollars by way of company profits out of Australia, according to the Australian Tax Office. Not only that, but many of these companies also use a tax trick called transfer pricing to avoid paying their fair share of tax into Australia, according to tax expert Martin Fell. A primary example of a big multinational company that does not pay its fair share of tax, the Australian government and hence the Australian people, is Apple. Last year, Apple's Australian revenue was a staggering $7.9 billion. That's $7,900 million, according to the Sydney Morning Herald. However, Apple only paid the comparably minuscule amount of $85 million in tax to the Australian government. This is only a shade over 1% of its total revenue. To put this into perspective, the Australian corporate business tax rate is 30% of a business's total profits. Assuming Apple's profit margin in Australia is 20%, which is being very conservative, it should be paying at least $474 million in tax, which is $389 million more than it actually is. $389 million would go a long way to helping everyday Australians like you and I, in funding better education and health projects, for example. And this is only one of the hundreds of multinational companies that are invested in Australia. Secondly, foreign investment has forced many of our famous brands overseas. Vegemite, Tim Tams, Arnott's Biscuits, Golden Circle are all great national Australian brands loved by millions of bronzed Aussies, like you and I. Or shall I say, were. Sadly, each of these beloved brands that are cultural icons of our nation's fabric have fallen victim to foreign investment and are no longer owned by Australians. Golden Circle is now owned by a US-based company, Kraft Foods. Vegemite, which many argue is symbolic of Australian culture itself, is now owned by an American company, Mondelez. The company was responsible for the disastrous attempt to rebrand our Vegemite with the epic fail of Ice Snack 2.0. Arnott's Biscuits, including our precious Tim Tams, are now owned by the US. Anyone who has tried the new Arnott's shapes knows all too well that foreign companies do not understand us Australians. So surely, ladies and gentlemen, we as Australians should maintain ownership of our major brands and companies to remain in control of our own identity, not some foreign companies. Unfortunately, the damage has already been done, and very few of our iconic Australian homegrown brands remain with us today due to the continued selling off of Australian businesses to foreign investors. Thirdly, because of foreign investments, we as a country are exposed to the risk of being negatively impacted by a crisis that occurs overseas. For example, if a financial crisis occurs in the country of one of our primary foreign investors, this could impact on thousands of Australian jobs. This is because the country is more likely to support their own country's people in times of crisis or potentially sell their business entirely. Which leads me to our next point. By selling it, we lose control over where our land or businesses may end up, as the foreign investors have the right to sell it to whomever they see fit. This could potentially be with a country or business who does not share our core Australian values. Our national security is also put at risk and potentially compromised, as stated by journalist Sims at The Age, because of foreign investment, as we are letting foreign companies control our vital Australian assets. These assets include utilities that were previously government-owned, such as electricity, ports, and land surrounding defence facilities, and other significant natural resources, including mineral deposits and agricultural land. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I'll end with a quote from successful Australian business owner Dick Smith. "I am proud that we ran good, honest business, paid our taxes, never went broke, and gave work to many thousands of Australians. Let's do the right thing and take care of our own companies first." Thank you.
I call upon the first English speaker, Louis Workman.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of our debate is that foreign investment and ownership is detrimental to Australia. We agree with the definition given by the affirmative team. However, we, the negative team, believe that the statement is false. Tonight, as first speaker, I will be talking to you about two separate points, these being the stability and progress, and also the economic benefits gained by the foreign investors. I will also be rebutting the opposition's points. Our second speaker will be talking about two more points, these being the access to new international opportunities and also the amount of resources that Australia has at its disposal. Alright. And sorry, our third speaker will be rebutting and will be summing up our team's case. Now I'll move on to my rebuttal points. The first being that money from Australia has, the first being that the affirmative speaker stated that the money from Australia has the potential to leave the country. This is false because it is based on countries gaining from capitalist profit and from their services. He also said that the topic for the debate is regarding foreign governments obtaining Australia's land. This is false because this This is about them being able to profit from their services and also... I'm sorry, I'll have to dismiss that rebuttal. These are my arguments. I will be discussing 2 points: the stability and progress we obtain from foreign investors and the economic benefits we gain from these investors. The most common fear, my first point is, the most common fear is that money will be leaving the country. This, however, especially in the short term, is untrue, because economists say that in the short term, it's purely beneficial that we have foreign investments, and in the long term, if other countries are also willing to be the host of these economic ventures, it will also be beneficial in the long run. Economists agree that, and due to this, if played correctly, it will be purely beneficial for both countries. Now to my second point: foreign investment gives profit to any global companies, and sorry, I need to rethink the thing. Foreign investment gives profit to either global companies and companies. Sorry, I can't. I'm going to have to dismiss my second point because I can't read the writing. Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I don't know. Sorry, guys. I can't read the writing.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Patrick Mottler.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and Madam Chairman. The topic for tonight's debate is that foreign investment and ownership are detrimental to Australia, which we, the Affirmative, strongly and adamantly agree with. Before I get on to my points, I'd firstly like to rebut some of the points made by our opposition. The first negative speaker has said to you that money won't leave the country. Well, as I'll allude to in my own points, up to billions of dollars will leave the country to overseas investors. Now onto my points. Australia's natural resources are vast, but how does foreign investment impact them? Well, according to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade website, the largest stock of foreign investment in Australia is mining, followed by manufacturing, followed by real estate. Consider mining for a moment. Currently, Australia is the world's leading producer in a host of minerals and elements, such as iron ore, gold, silver, and zinc. But some 83% of the mining industry in Australia is foreign owned. Of the 3 largest Australian mines, foreign ownership accounts for 3/4 of BHP Billiton, over 80% of Rio Tinto, and 100% of Xstrata. We could argue that Australia's mining industry was built on the backbone of foreign investment, the 1850s gold rush, for example. The main issue, however, is not about foreign ownership, but whether overseas investors contribute fairly to the revenue in return for exploiting minerals owned by us in Australia. Mining has enormous profits, whether commodity prices are high or low. Figures from briefing paper of the Green show that from 2011 to 2015, foreign owners earned $265 billion from their investments in Australia, an average of $53 billion per annum. Whilst a large percentage of profits were reinvested in Australia, a lot still ends up overseas. Of the $37 billion profit to foreign equity owners in 2011, $7 billion was paid overseas. $7 billion. Imagine that reinvested in affordable housing prices, healthcare and tertiary education. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, foreign investment in Australia farmlands is an emotional topic. Increasingly, countries that rely on imports to feed their food are buying land and water in other countries to grow their own food. Multinational corporations have also realised the value of agricultural land and water and have begun investing heavily in these assets as there are large profits to be made if they control the means to produce food. As a country with a strong agricultural sector, Australia has long attracted overseas interest and foreign buyers, and governments have begun heavily investing in agricultural land and water in Australia. However, if large chunks of Australia are sold off to foreign interests, we are likely to have less control over our long-term food supply. Now, with more than 10 million hectares, S. Kidman & Co. is the largest landholder in Australia. In 2015, Treasurer Scott Morrison locked its sale. He said, after consulting with Foreign Investment Review Board, saying it would be contrary to Australia's national interests. But foreign funds such as US teacher superannuation entity Tia Criff already have reported investment of $1 billion in prime farming country in Australia. A European pension-backed company, Ace Farming, is currently Australia's largest dairy farmer, purchasing a total of 3,300 hectares of prime farming land in Victoria. Ladies and gentlemen, laws on foreign investment and agricultural land and water are lax in Australia, and currently we don't keep accurate records to track levels of foreign ownership. In this day and age of global warming and food insecurity, this could be detrimental to Australia unless we produce a system to track purchases of food processing, land and water to determine if these purchases are in national interest. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, let's consider the $64 billion worth of overseas investment in Australian real estate. Increasingly, Australians are finding it hard and difficult to fulfil the Australian dream, which is to own their own home. In 2014, an International Monetary Fund report found that the ratio of housing prices to average income was 31.6% above the historical average in Australia. That same year, the CEO of property-based private equity firm Qualitas said that the proportion of foreign to local buyers has been steadily increasing over the last 2 years, and it was now common for many projects to have 40% of total buyers being foreign. But how does overseas investment impact on housing prices in Australia? Well, the Reserve Bank's Christopher Kent told a 2014 federal inquiry into house prices that it was hard to deny that foreign investors were impacting on housing market, particularly, and I quote, where you throw in an extra buyer who is willing to pay the extra dollar. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, our abundance of natural resources, richness of our agricultural farmlands, and the dream of owning our own Australian home are amongst the things that make Australia great. Whilst we don't rule out all foreign investment or ownership, we do think it's time to tighten the laws on where and who our resources are owned by. Ladies and gentlemen, let's make house pricing affordable for the average Australian again. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a lucky country. Let's keep it that way. Thank you.
I call upon the second negative speaker, Harry Graham.
Sorry. Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin tonight, I would like to address something. I would like to address that our team's first member attended the debate at last minute. This is also his first debate, coincidentally, and has never, in his life, had a formal debate. As such, we hope the chairman acknowledges that perhaps he would not be as, not to be insulting, but competent as the remainders. Very sorry, I've had a bit of a mix-up with my cards. The first affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that money would be better off spent in Australia directly to companies such as Centrelink or Medicare, so that they can fund Australians through that. This is false, because as I shall go on to explain in my speech, foreign investment provides more gains than purely monetary. They have also tried to tell you that housing prices have risen purely because of foreign investment. This, however, is also false. There are many factors which must be considered when one is discussing the topic of housing inflation, not purely foreign investment. Today, as second speaker, I'll be talking to you about several points. The first being that given Australia is a resource-rich country with vast amounts of land, labour, and natural resources, we can utilize these things through foreign investment to be used to our advantage. I will also be discussing how foreign investment gives Australians access to new international opportunities and with potential investors. Now to address my first point. Australia is one of the most gifted countries on earth when it comes to our resources. We have miles upon miles of natural resources at our disposal, a skilled labour force, and more farmland than we know what to do with. With all these resources, does the possibility of being able to market these goods and services to overseas investors not seem like a tremendous idea? Especially seeing as how much we have of them. Think about it. Having enough resources to be able to capitalize these products for profit, while also still having enough for ourselves. Increasing our international profit gain, while still being able to sustain the country, Australia. Australia has a tremendous history of excelling at overseas deals, most notably with Indonesia and China. This is a practical example of how well our government can acquire and act out overseas deals with property or investments. Evidence, which coinciding dismantles the idea that the overseas deals are much too risky to be taken on board. My point is, Australia's capitalist society can provide the country with a limited amount of annual profit from internal businesses. But if we truly wish to expand into the possibility of an international market to raise our profit margin even higher, we must take the leap of faith and join overseas investors and property owners. Only then can we succeed. Only then can we truly expand ourselves into new realms and take our economy above and beyond what it would resemble should it remain purely in Australia, which, despite what the other team attempts to dismantle, is the topic of this debate. Now to my second point. Australia is a nation of migrants. We have developed over the years, constantly engaged by the influence of people of many cultures. Foreign investment provides the same opportunity with the added bonus of capitalist gain. It gives us the chance to explore, receive, test, and innovate in new products, which could be provided by our potential partnerships. Japan, China, Indonesia, all consistently progressing their understanding of technology. Their common factor? They are all currently participating in trade deals with Australia. China, Australia's largest trading partner, is a world leader in technological development. Alongside them are Japan. Does innovating in new and improved technology not seem like a good aspect of foreign ownership to be considered? Obviously, the answer is yes. So, Does it not make sense that for the sake of innovation, Australia opened its doors to foreign investment as a viable option for profit? Keyword, viable. These countries have provided us with so much innovative ideas and inventions in the past that surely, by opening our doors to a closer relationship with them, this will continue. Yes, our culture may be great, but it is not alone. Not all great ideas are founded in Australia. And if we want to experience them all, we have to be willing to expand ourselves into the possibilities and opportunities that foreign ownership and investment provide. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we believe that it is high time that Australia open its doors to that Australia opened its doors much wider to overseas investors and property owners, as we have successfully proven that the benefits are exceptional in comparison to what the other team would likely have you believe. Thank you for listening.
Call on the third affirmative speaker, Luke Valenti.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that foreign investment and ownership are detrimental to Australia, which is a notion that we, the Affirmative, most strongly support. Prior to summarising the points articulated by my fellow debaters in the red and black, I would first like to rebut some of the points made by the opposition. The first speaker has stated in rebuttal that foreigners don't take or gain any money from Australians. As Patrick has already stated, foreign investors take up to $7 billion of profits made in the mines. They are taking the money earned by our hard-working Australians, and this has no benefit to us whatsoever. Ladies and gentlemen, foreign investment must stop. He also stated that there will be economic benefits from foreign investors and owners. As Australians, why could we possibly want foreign investors to benefit from our companies and our resources? We would benefit far more from the success of Australian owners, as the money would stay in our country. The second speaker has stated that we have the resources at our disposal to sell. According to the Australian, independent SA Senator Nick Xenophon is worried that corporations who aren't state-owned but are effectively arms of foreign governments going under the radar in purchasing farmland. Under Australia's foreign investment rules, state-owned companies must get approval for any local investment. If these foreign governments are planning how they are going to feed their people in the future, surely the Australian government should have been considering this issue more seriously. He told journalist Evan Stamper, "We should be selling the food, not the farm." The second speaker has also said that foreign investment isn't the only reason for rising house prices, except he provided no other reasoning. He also claimed during his rebuttal that our first speaker said money should be spent within Australia on things like Centrelink. However, our first speaker did not say this. He has said that the money made from our foreign investments should go overseas, but why wouldn't this money be better spent on lowering housing prices or upgrading hospitals or improving our schools? I will now summarise our team's case. Our first speaker, Tom, spoke about how all the profits made from the investments and the ownership are going overseas, and how that has absolutely no benefit to our country. If we want our country to flourish with a strong economy, then it is extremely important to have owners within Australia. We need the money to stay here for our own country to prosper. Tom then went on to propose the idea of national sovereignty and how independent nations which have declared their independence, have an organised government and are self-contained, have a right to exist without other nations interfering. It is essentially the unspoken rule of a nation's right to exist. We shouldn't be allowing these other countries to interfere in our business. We should leave the investments and the ownership of companies and businesses to the hard-working Australians, not foreigners. Unfortunately, there are very few iconic brands remaining in Australia. Even our prestigious Vegemite has been sold out to a foreign owner. It is time to take back our companies so that they are Australian owned. Tom's last point was about the risk of being susceptible to overseas crisis, where our businesses will be at the mercy of the foreign investor, who will sell off to anyone they can. This could potentially ruin our business, and this is most definitely a path we do not want to take. Our second speaker, Patrick, spoke to you about the natural resources already owned by foreign investors, like the Chinese, as well as providing examples of prior foreign investment that has been detrimental to our country. Patrick expanded on the mining industry and how foreign investors are taking up to $7 billion of the profits made in the mines. He then talked about farmland and how if large chunks of our land are sold off to investors to produce food, then we will have less control over our long-term food supply. Patrick's last point was about how overseas investment in Australian property is resulting in high prices that make housing unaffordable for the average Australians. We need to tighten the laws on foreign investors and owners. In conclusion, foreign investment and ownership is most definitely detrimental to our country, as we are susceptible to many different issues that will create disasters for Australian companies. We will be putting ourselves at the mercy of foreign investors who will do whatever suits them. However, this does not suit our country. We will be far better off with Australian investors and owners because there is far less risk and the money is staying inside our country. I will leave you with a quote from Dick Smith. If a foreign businessman wants to be an Australian citizen and bring his money in and live here and have his wife become a member of the Country Women's Association and he become a member of the Rural Fire Brigade, then he should be allowed to. But selling to offshore is just wrong. You may as well not have borders. Thank you.
I call upon the third negative speaker, Finn Hansen.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that foreign investment and ownership are detrimental to Australia. We, the negative team, know that this statement is completely and utterly false. First, I would like to begin with some rebuttal against what the Affirmative team has told you today. The first Affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that foreign investment creates problems for Australia's home companies. However, take, for example, Vegemite.
The speaker himself stated that Vegemite failed to launch through an American company. This goes to show that the true original Australian brand is still strongly recognised as the original and the best. Isn't that a shining light for Australia? The second affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that money will in fact flow out of the country. But how? We ourselves are gaining great money from foreign investment and trade, and as we have already shown you, this acts as an incredible source of relief to our country, which is in debt at the moment. That is something that we need to fix, and this scenario of foreign investment and ownership can help us to be relieved of this. The second affirmative speaker has also tried to tell you that they are not ruling out any benefits that come from foreign investment and trade. However, this is not what stands. Their job is to argue that foreign investment and trade are detrimental to Australia without any exceptions, and ours is just the opposite. The third affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that our first speaker tried to tell you, it's a lot of telling, that foreign investors would gain nothing from investment, trade and ownership. But he hasn't said this at all. This is a straw man fallacy, which is defined as one side of the argument being pleaded as entirely extreme. Our first speaker has proven to you that we would gain a massive increase in both stability and Australia's progress as a country. Australia has been a part of a global revolution in areas such as medicine and technology. An Australian scholarship is something that is highly valued if you have it, and we've been involved in projects all over the world that have helped to change the world as we know it today. The deals that we make with other countries can help us to increase our potency in these areas, acting almost like a charity in this way. They can allow us to push our boundaries and expand our capabilities. Australia is already in a good light as a country. We are great global citizens. Why should we cease any opportunity to take this even further? He has also opened your eyes to the fact that actions such as these would be invaluably beneficial to Australia's economy. Anyone that tells you that our economy is well off has a stick up their butt. The evidence is perfectly fleshed out that we're not doing nearly as well as we could be. So how do we fix this? We've worked with other countries before, and working with countries such as Indonesia and China has shown us that this can be beneficial. So why should it affect us, Australia, any differently to all these other countries? Our second speaker has spoken to you about the international opportunities that can be created through these deals. The government struggles to keep everyone happy, as all have a different opinion on what the government needs to invest in. With what we gain from foreign investment, we can become more and more, let's just screw up. We can become more and more capable of supporting all of these concerns. We're essentially married to our government. They can't cope without us, and we can't cope without them. If it's a case of happy wife, happy life, then these investments allow us to be more in agreement with our government. He has also stated that the wide range of resources that Australia has greatly increases our capability to work with foreign investors. We truly are a resource-rich country, and what we have makes it much easier for our country to succeed. But these resources suffer because of our lacking of ability to invest in them and increase their overall potential. Foreign investment and trade are one of the ways that we can increase this, as this lets us be more lenient about the resources we invest in. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, foreign investment and ownership are not at all detrimental to Australia. In fact, they are quite the opposite.
The points that we have put forward have shown how all the aspects Australia mainly struggles with are benefited from this. Thank you for your patience and time.
Please wait while the adjudicator finalises the result. I now invite the adjudicator, Ms. Lowen, forward.
I've got a couple of questions I need to ask first of all. So, did you find this a very difficult topic at Year 10?
Let's say so. The topic itself wasn't what we found difficult. We really had trouble with the preparation time, mainly just
Okay.
with everything else that was going on, and we found that the time that the topic was released for us to actually know what it was a little bit shorter than what we were used to in the past.
Yeah, I know it's very crunched up at the end of the year. I think what we need to do is look and see if we can scab some time earlier in the year so it's a bit more time for people here. And that's really been very difficult for us because we just don't have the time. What it might mean is that we might have to, instead of having, I think we have 1 week, second week, and then a week off. I think we might have to scab some of those weeks off so that you maybe only have 2 weeks in some rounds rather than the 3 weeks, because I can see how problematic it is here. What did you think was the problem apart from the time thing?
It was a hard topic, but
Wasn't too bad.
yeah, what can you
It wasn't too bad. Okay. What you all have to remember is that when you have a topic like this, you have to assume that the audience doesn't know anything about economics, and you need to explain things a little bit more than you have. I'm going to go, first of all, I'll go through individual speakers and I'll talk a little bit more about the topic. Okay, let's start with Tom. Yep. Okay, Tom. Not only do we don't generally, when we're in debating, give a word by word definition of what each word means. That's what you have to do in your preparation, so that you know exactly what the words mean. And then what you tend to do or should do in a debate is have a sort of a fairly expanded explanation of, look, this is what the topic tonight means. We're talking about this and this happens and that happens, okay? Not just like a word by word definition. So you need more of an explanation. One of the things you need to do is you need to look at everybody a little bit more. You tended to look, I'm not sure who you were looking at, I'm not sure if it was me or the camera, or the pretty girl who's operating the camera. If that's the case, don't be distracted. You must really concentrate on your debate. Okay, I thought that despite your, not explaining the definition very well, it was very well organised. Like, your material was well organised. You had a lot of source material to support it. So I thought that overall you did a pretty good job. Okay, so Louis, now you were pretty nervous to get up, and what was the problem?
Well, this is the first time I've ever done a debate, for one, and for two, I was very last second. I am not actually part of the debate team, but no one else could actually do it.
they
So I
wrote you
did a
in.
guest fill-in last night,
Yeah.
and that's,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So you poor old thing, you were roped in at the last
Last
minute.
minute,
Last
yeah.
minute. Well, do you know what I really like about that kind of thing, and is that people who are roped in at the last minute, they come up, they give it their best shot. They don't cry, they don't break down and run off and stuff like that. And I've got, you know, I really like that. I like that someone came up and gave it their best shot. So you're going to get the pity vote for the certificate tonight, and I think everybody would probably agree with that might be a good thing. Okay, so now we know what happened there. I've been doing this for a long time. I was pretty sure there was either you were roped in or something else had happened, but never mind. So that's a bit unfortunate for your team, but you know what, I also mind the fact that you actually, you know, you got someone so you could have a debate, so, you know, that's really nice that you did that. Okay, now we come on to Patrick. Patrick, you looked at everyone around the room, that was good. You need a bit more energy in your presentation, but again, like your first speaker, you were well organised and very well referenced. You know, as you explain, you had things, you explained them, and then you had some source material to support that. Harry, you don't normally have to apologise for your other speeches, okay? Because I kind of worked out, it was pretty obvious that, you know, something had fallen off the rails there, okay? So don't, and if that happens again, you don't have to apologise. You just get up and you do your own thing. Now, good, clear speaking voice, you're quite engaging. You need a lot more rebuttal. And I think your team suffered from this too a little bit, which were that you made lots of assertions about things, but no real proof or evidence of it, okay, or very minimal. So an assertion is when you make a claim about something and it doesn't have very much substance to it. And I think we'll come to yours as well. So you've got to be very careful when you're preparing a debate, not to get too kind of jingoistic. You know, it's not a political debate where you're trying to rev up the soldiers, okay? You've got to kind of look at, you know, if I'm going to make this statement, what kind of evidence do I have, you know, to support that and prove that? And I think that you need perhaps to do a lot more work on rebuttal. Okay, so that's Harry. Now I'll come to Luke. Luke, you've got to inject some enthusiasm. It was like watching The Living Dead. It's not like you were frightened when you got up, not by any means, but you do need some kind of, you know, you have to rally the troops a little bit more. You know, you have to try to really engage the audience. I thought you had a nice, very nice ending, but I thought that some of your debate suffered a little bit because, again, it was a little bit not enough rebuttal. And also not enough form, you know, sort of making statements that didn't have really strong support for them, okay? Which seemed a bit odd considering the other two had done quite a good job at that. Okay. Finn, you're quite outgoing when you get up, so that was good, nice engagement with the audience. I like that you referred to the straw man fallacy. But a lot of your, there wasn't nearly enough rebuttal for a third speaker. There was a lot of material that wasn't really quite on topic, and like you'd make a statement and then the follow-on to that didn't really kind of join. It was very difficult to follow your line of reasoning and your line of thought, so you need to become a lot more disciplined when you're doing your third speaker work. Okay, so I thought tonight was a very problematic debate. I know you were really short of time, and I think that really showed in the debate because despite the fact that the first speakers, the affirmative team had referenced things and that, there needs to be an explanation. There are two different types of investment in Australia. Didn't anyone sort of look up? That's on Wikipedia. You know, and I'm a goose. I've got no idea about economics, but even I know that there are two different investments. Why? Because I looked up Wikipedia. So things like, you know, you need to understand more fully about how these things work. And it looked like people were just skirting around a very superficial understanding of really what is a fundamentally important part of investment. So, and I'm not sure whether these guys, whether it was because you felt that you didn't have enough time, but you know, investment is, it's almost as though you sort of gave up and thought, well, it is pretty horrible how these people are buying the farm and everything. You hadn't looked at some of the really major benefits of having investment in our country. Like when we first started off as a nation, we had no money to do any mining with or anything like that. So, you know, there were some really powerful arguments to support investment. Okay, so I've given it to the affirmative team tonight, so congratulations for that. Thank you very much to the negative team for coming up and bringing your poor unsuspecting first speaker. And when you go downstairs, I think there's some lollies down there, so for at least putting up a team, which is good for the affirmative, you can help yourselves to a lolly. And if Mr. Tran says, tell Miss Sloan she's got to pay for it, just laugh a lot.
I call upon a member of the run-up team to give a vote of thanks.
I'm just going to come out the front and make this more official and address you all. So, we'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. This was a really important debate to not just our team, I'm sure, but to you guys. Yeah, it's more difficult, obviously, than what we're used to, because the political spectrum of things makes everything a little bit more difficult, and obviously everybody was a bit shorter on time. But you guys were a great audience, and I'd like to thank you for that. You sat here, no doubt, almost some of you, I reckon, no idea what we were talking about, but even still, you gave us your best attention, and we really appreciate that. Thank you.
I call upon a member of the winning team to second that vote of thanks.
Oh, on behalf of Rostrevor, I'd just like to thank Portside for coming out and putting up a great debate. It was good. Timekeeper and chairman, thanks for running the debate. The audience, thanks for coming out. And to the adjudicator, thanks for some great advice. We really take that on board. Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. I now declare this debate closed.
Okay, now just before you all